You think it's the end of the world and that you lost the game. Well, today, I'm here to shed some light and some hope upon you guys. Maybe you can make that comeback. In this video, I'm going to talk about 3 common situations or scenarios that I find myself in and most people will find themselves in when they're at a loss or in a situation where they can come back. Now, this is merely a guideline video and some tips. Just because you watch this video, all of a sudden you're going to make every comeback and every play and you're going to come back and tell the story to everybody that how you came back from that loss. But those are the most thrilling games, and some of the games that actually hooked me on to Paragon. And why I started playing Paragon in the beginning was the thrill, the adrenaline of making a comeback play or hustling and churning through the minutes after minutes trying to outplay my enemy when I'm at a disadvantage. And hopefully this video can shed some light, some understanding of why you get into these certain situations, and then how to capitalize on these disadvantages that you have been given because you somehow messed up and now you're trapped into a situation you don't want to be in. So let's get right into it. The first common scenario is really common and pretty plain simple, is inhibitor loss. Now, when you lose an inhibitor, we all know, well, most people know that it's not the end of the world. Now, newer players tend to think it is the end of the world, but it's not. Calm your ass down. The first rule is don't panic. You have lost an inhibitor and the enemy team has spawned super minions. That's all it means. The enemy team has spawned super minions and your core is exposed, obviously. Luckily, with the new patches and stuff, people can't really backdoor you no more, so they have to push that lane in order to take your core. So don't think it's the end of the world. All that has happened is that they have passive lane pressure without any heroes having to be in that lane. However, the best thing to counter inhibitor loss is get your caster, get the person who has the best wave clear on your team to maintain that lane. Usually this is a caster like your Gideons, your Howitzers, your Countess, especially really good. Anybody with the best wave clear on your team and you could maintain that lane. Once you have pushed up that lane to maybe halfway or 3/4 of the way up, make sure you're warded on that lane so you can push that lane safely. Again, why wards are really important in this game is you can split push safely. So have that lane push all that time and use that window of opportunity to again go about the game, try to get a team fight, a good play in, or just to, you know, farm up a bit so you can get back on track. That's usually the biggest tip I can give you when you lose an inhibitor. And another tip I can give you is when they're sieging an inhibitor or when they split pushing towards 2 inhibitors, in fact. Usually what I see a lot of people do is, again, they panic. You know, they're split pushing a lane, you guys are down a hero or 2, and you guys don't know which inhibitor to go to. Sometimes you just have to accept the fact that you're gonna lose an inhibitor, whether it's one of them. A lot of people I see do is they go back and forth between both inhibitors and then they can't maintain both sieges at the same time and they end up losing both inhibitors when they can just commit to one and secure one inhibitor that won't go down. Trust me, losing one inhibitor is way better than losing 2 inhibitors when you could have saved one of them, okay? So focus your manpower on one inhibitor if you know one of them is going to go down for sure. It's a big mistake that I've made and that a lot of people still make, is decide on which inhibitor you want to save if they're split pushing the objective. Again, a lot of other strategies can come into play. If they're divided in numbers and you have 5 people still up on your team, go in on the team that only has 2 people in one lane or 3 people in one lane. You know, focus your manpower. Try to get picks off or poke off before the inhibitors get, you know, taken down. That's obviously harder than said done, but it is a tip I can give you. And that's really the weakest situation, is inhibitor loss. It's not really much of a disadvantage now with the new patches and how the comeback mechanics work now. But that's really what is the tips I can give you. Maintain the lanes with a caster. Use that window of opportunity to make plays. And then maintain other inhibitors, because the more inhibitors you lose, the harder it is to come back. Now, the second situation is another common situation that happens a lot and really tilts the game to one side of the team, is Orb Prime activation. I'm not talking about when Orb Prime is getting contested and there's a battle going on over Orb Prime. I'm talking about they got the Orb Prime and now they're gonna siege your inhibitors. Usually what happens when Orb Prime is activated, obviously they have to get the Orb Prime. So obviously scouting it out, putting wards, seeing if the enemy team is low while doing Orb Prime is a really good tip. If they're low doing Orb Prime, then start a fight and get some picks off before they get Orb Prime. Or maybe if they have already activated Orb Prime and your team is near and they're low, don't let them escape. Go in, take them down, get a couple kills. That will really hinder them from sieging your inhibitors if they're going to be down 2 or 3 heroes. So that's always a good tip. But now we're going to move on to, okay, they contested Orb Prime and you weren't there to start a fight while they were contesting Orb Prime. This is really simple for a lot of veteran players. They already know what to do, but I still want to explain to refresh the minds of newer players of what happens when Orb Prime is activated. Basically, Orb Prime is a sieging mechanic. It's a tool that is used for sieging. Okay, so when Orb Prime is activated, if you can split push lanes, if you could push out your lanes while Orb Prime is getting contested, for example, if you know they're getting Orb Prime, you had a ward on there, you saw all 5 of them there, but maybe 2 of your allies are down, split push the lane as hard as you can before they get the Orb Prime. Go into lane, split push it out as far as you can, buying you some time so they have to push out the lanes. Now with Death Touch being removed from the Orb Prime activation, the enemy team has to reset their lanes before they can siege down an inhibitor. So focus most noticeably the lane that's pushed the most. For example, if your mid lane is really pushed while they're contesting Orb Prime and you know they're getting Orb Prime, go to mid lane and try to push out the lane, which is probably one of the safest things you could do. You can go Leroy Jenkins, ball to the wall, and try to steal the Orb Prime. But honestly, if the enemy team is coordinated and they're a good team, they're not going to let you get the Orb Prime. Let's be real here. 5 versus 1 usually doesn't go the way you want it to. I know you've seen the crazy plays where people steal Orb Prime, but trust me, they're crazy plays because that rarely happens. So it's really hard to contest Orb Prime in a 5v1 situation. I mean, it is possible, but usually like 75% of the time you're gonna die. That's usually what happens, and we just gotta accept the facts. There are obviously some really good heroes that are good at sneaking Orb Prime, like Gideon or Murdoch can snipe it, or Rampage can throw a rock, and if you think you could pull it off, then all power to you. But some really safe ways to do it is push out your lanes while Orb Prime is getting contested, especially if you know. Again, going back to why wards are especially important to gain map vision on objectives like Orb Prime. Also, if they're pushing down your lanes, you have to play on the defensive. That's a really big tip. The second tip I can give you when Orb Prime is activated. You're on the defensive. They're going to be sieging towers, so you got to be defensive. You got to focus minions. Get your casters to focus on minions. Use your abilities on the minions. Try to force a fight under the tower while they have no minions. I've seen multiple teams, including myself. I've had plays where we have Orb Prime, we make a mistake, we fight under tower when we have no minions because we get it too aggressive and we lose the fight. So focus, try to get a battle under your tower. That's harder said than done again, but focus minions, especially if you have good casters. If you have dual casters on your team, like you have a Countess and a Gideon, you guys have really good lane pressure and wave clear, so keep that to your advantage. Keep that minions cleared. Every time a minion waves comes in, clear the minions, and if they try to tower dive you, play it safe and try to keep fighting under the tower, okay? That's the biggest tip I can give you, is focus minions, play on the defensive, and push lanes while they're contesting or prime. Now, we're going to move on to the last situation, which is probably the hardest one to come back from. A lot of people struggle with this one. I struggle with this one. It's super hard. Any of these that I'm telling you are pretty hard to make a comeback. That's why they're called comebacks. None of these are easy. But it is possible with certain guidance and changing the way you play. The last one is CXP deprivation, card point experience loss. First step to knowing to coming back from this, is realizing that you're at a CXP disadvantage. With the earlier you notice that you're behind in card points or CXP, the better chances you have of coming back. If you notice that your carry is down 3 CXP behind the enemy carry, then you know you're at a disadvantage. That's the easiest way to tell it, is usually telling and comparing your carries. If your carry is at 30 CXP and the enemy carry is already at 36 CXP, you can already foreshadow that you're going to have a tough time in the late game, because the carry is going to be dishing out more damage in team fights compared to your carry. Usually that's the way I can tell, is comparing the carries. If you don't know what a carry is Sparrow, Murdoch, Grim, Marauders, Revenants, people who will deal tons of damage in the late game. Those are the carries, and usually that's the best way to gauge if you're behind CXP. Also, you can gauge by your team in general. You can scan over your team and you can usually tell if you're at a CXP loss. I usually considered 4 or 5 CXP being at a disadvantage. If you're 4 or 5 CXP behind, you're already at a disadvantage. Even 3, like if you're 3 CXP behind, you're already starting to get that disadvantage. So keeping a gauge on how far behind on CXP you are is the first step to noticing and to make a comeback. Now, usually the biggest thing of why people get CXP deprived and why teams tend to snowball is the biggest culprit in the game, and that is Raptor Camp. When it comes to Raptor Camp, each Raptor gives you 800 CXP. Now, with a new addition to Gold Buff, you also have to keep a gauge on Gold Buff giving you 300 CXP, okay? So these are really big objectives if you're CXP deprived on your team. The biggest thing is people don't know how to handle the Raptor Camp. What do I mean by people don't know how to handle the Raptor Camp? A lot of people had the mentality that they have to wait for their carry to get the Raptor Camp. Now, that's a good mentality. Obviously, in the perfect scenario, in the perfect world, you can always give the Raptors to your carry. But however, I always see this in solo queue teams especially, is there's no coordination when it comes to taking Raptors. It's the 30-minute marks, nobody has taken Raptors. It's the 25-minute mark, it's the 40-minute mark, and you guys have never contested Raptors, okay? Raptors is one of the biggest objectives in the game, especially in the early and mid game. It's a big objective. It tends to fall off late game because people are usually fed by then, but it's still an objective through the most of the game. Now, it's a good thing that you wait for your carry to get the Raptor camps, but sometimes don't wait for the carry. A lot of times what I see people do is they're typing to their carry, hey, Raptors are going to be up, hey, they're up, come over here, hey, they're up, they've been up for a minute, why are you not here yet? And you have the mid laner and the off laner and the jungler in a great position to take Raptors, but they're waiting for their carry. That's a really big mistake right there, because you know what buying time does? It gives a time window for your enemy to come contest Raptors. And this is not always the case. Maybe your carry's dead, or maybe he's pushing out a lane, or maybe, you know, something happened and he just can't be there. I've been in a 5-stack where we're all coordinating and my carry's like, hey, I can't be there for Raptors, just take the damn Raptors. Don't let the enemy have the Raptors. You need to take the Raptors, whether it's your carry, your offlaner, your jungler, your freaking support, like anybody. In higher elo gameplay and master gameplay, diamond gameplay, whatever the hell you want to call it, higher rank gameplay, they chunk through Raptors as soon as it spawns. As soon as Raptors spawn, they're already getting taken. That's what separates really good players from really high tier players is once Raptor comes up, they're gone. That's how fast people take Raptors, and that's how you need to get into the habit of it. Good carries are going to be there, and they're going to have a timestamp in their head when Raptors are going to come up. And if they're not a good carry, they're not going to be there for Raptors. Sometimes they, you know, shit happens and they can't be there, but if they're a good carry, they're going to be there for Raptors and be like, hey man, Raptors came up, you weren't here, we didn't want the enemy team to take them. And that's it. You don't have to say anything else. Get your jungler, your offlaner to do it. It only takes like 2 or 3 people during the mid game to take Raptors. It's not that hard. Don't let the enemy team take Raptors. Again, another thing, focus on last hitting. A lot of people, I tend to do this a lot, is you don't focus your last hits. You're just brainlessly pushing a lane, especially if you're like a bruiser and you don't have a lot of damage, like a caster or like a countess that can just like clear a wave in one shot, or like a carry in the late game. He can just one shot a minion and they're dead. Focus your last hits. Focus your last hits. The best players have the basics nailed down to the core to 100%. They know how to last hit, and last hitting is super important, okay? Last hit minions, you need to focus on that, especially if you're CXP deprived. Another big one, another reason why you might be CXP deprived is the enemy team has been invading your jungle. They've been taking your camps. They've been hitting your Amber Link. If you've seen my Greystone build, I'm notorious for this. I love invading jungle. It's my freaking job as an offlaner or as a jungler to invade your jungle. And if you have a really good offlaner or really good enemy jungler, they're sure as hell gonna invade your jungle. Okay, again, going back to why wards are super important. Ward your freaking jungle, especially after your tier 2 falls. After your tier 2 falls, your jungle is more susceptible, more vulnerable to getting invaded. So ward your jungle, especially if you're CXP deprived. And if it's just one enemy invading your jungler, for example, if it's only the enemy jungler invading and you have good team coordination, then you can get a free pick on the jungler who's invading your jungle. Or maybe, you know, their caster is invading all the time and you can get a pick on them, and that's more CXP, okay? So ward your jungle when your tier 2 falls or when you're behind on CXP. Also, you need to rotate. You need to stay grouped a lot more, get assists, get kills. You know, start a group up more so you can get assists. Assists give you points, kills give you points. So making picks, making sure you have really good map vision on certain choke points. Or for example, if they always like to gank you right lane or something, freaking ward right lane. Or if they're always getting picks on mid lane, ward mid lane. That's a really big deal. Use wards, okay? That's a big reason, is having map awareness so you can get those camps, so you can get gold buffs, so you can get raptors. You need to ward all those objectives so you can be getting them. And after all, that's all the tips I can give you as far as being CXP deprived. So sorry the last one took a little bit, but it's the hardest one to explain and the hardest one to come back from. So those are the 3 scenarios. I hope you guys enjoyed them. It's your boy RapTRz, and I'll see you guys on the next one. If you have other tips on how to make a comeback, leave them down in the description. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate every view, every like, every subscription. It really means a lot. And leave other tips in which you think are really hard ways to come back from, or other problems you run into when you're trying to make a comeback. But anyways, I'll see you guys on Paragon.